Next, Senator Hagerty.
Thank you, Chairwoman Klobuchar. I'd like to call up next Hagerty Amendment number 27.
Okay, Hagerty Amendment number 27.
I'd like to remind everybody that what this overall bill is an attempt by the current majority to use their current power to remain in power forever. What my amendment does is prevent the current majority from changing the rules of their elections in an attempt to keep power and to avoid future competitive elections. Therefore, my amendment is going to delay the effective date of the entire bill until July 1 of 2027. That way, no one voting on this bill today will be in a position to change the rules for their own election. Thank you.
Response, I would just say that I don't think our democracy can afford to wait until 2027 when we see these over 350 bills that have been introduced in states across the country, with now 2 of them having passed in states of Georgia and the state of Florida, with 1 on its way in Texas. And I will say, in a number of the provisions in the manager amendment, which we've gotten some support for certain provisions in it, but not all of them, we did extend deadlines just to allow for more time for implementation, especially in rural areas, of small jurisdictions with under 3,000 people. We made some significant changes. But to simply say that we're going to wait till 2027, which is a significant time away for the entire bill, I think that just doesn't make sense to me, given that Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State of Michigan, said that she was able to make these changes in a year. The fact that we have 15 states, including Alaska and Georgia, that already have automatic registration, 21 states having same-day voter registration, including Idaho, Wyoming, and Iowa, 43 states that have early voting with the average length of 19 days, 34 states requiring no excuse voting by mail in 2019, including Florida and Alaska, and 45 did in 2020 during the pandemic. 40 states have online registration, including Alabama, Florida, and Iowa. And our point is this is clearly workable, but there are some states that aren't doing these things. And we all know things like, which many Republicans talked to me about after the 2020 election, the states waiting so long to start counting the ballots created a lot of confusion nationally in a presidential election. That's one of the things that we fix, something that people have reached out to me about on the other side of the aisle. And I just think that we don't want to wait till 2027 to make these changes.
I suggest that the sense of urgency may be for a different reason, Madam Chair, and I'm going to quote a Politico article that was just recently published May 3rd. I quote, "Many in the party," referring to the Democrat Party, "privately worry that frontline Democrats, like Warnock, or House Democrats that are vulnerable to redistricting, could lose their seats in Congress if Congress doesn't pass this legislation." I believe that's the concern here. I think this is an attempt to change the rules while you have this slimmest majority and put in place a system that's going to make it much easier to hold on to that power. Again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. This is something I would expect from communist China or from Venezuela's Maduro. That's exactly what Maduro did.
Okay,
That's
so what I see is going on around the country right now is attempts to limit votes. And elections that I've seen in the past, when a party loses a presidential election in a major way, or they suddenly lose states like Georgia, since you brought up Senator Warnock, they step back and they say, okay, what do we have to do to reach out to voters in a different way? What is it about our positions on issues that caused us to lose the presidential race? Or how do we do a better job of communicating with voters? Or what should our candidates be when we put them up? That's usually what parties do when they look back both on Democratic and Republican side in the past after an election. And instead, what I see here with these voter limitations and the impingement on the freedom to vote in these states. It's instead looking at it the opposite way, and that is saying, okay, a bunch of people voted in 2020 because they figured out and they made it easier for them to vote by mail, or they didn't have to get notary signatures through a hospital window while they had COVID in order to get an absentee ballot, or they allowed for early voting in bigger ways because it was more healthy and safer in the middle of a pandemic. And so what I see now is a rolling back of those changes. And to me, the answer should not be, let's make sure these people don't vote again. The answer should be, how do we reach out to people to get them on our side to vote for us? So that's why I have a problem with waiting on this.
Madam Chairman.
Senator Cruz, I just knew you'd want to respond to that.
Well, with all respect, that was a wildly inaccurate and partisan assessment of what is occurring. And I would note that this bill was drafted following the 2016 election, after Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton. And Senator from Minnesota suggested when a party loses, they reassess their positions. The Democratic Party didn't do that. The Democratic Party insisted for 4 years that Hillary won and the election was stolen, and it was Russia that stole it. And for 4 years, we heard that over and
You
over
must
and
not
over
have been in the same electoral college room as me.
Madam Chairman, I'm speaking.
You voted for Okay.
The Democratic Party did not reassess any policies, but instead, the response to losing that election in 2016 was to introduce this bill to cause millions of illegal immigrants to be registered to vote for Democrats, to cause felons and criminals to be registered to vote for Democrats. And I would note that now in the 2020 election, there were a number of closely competitive Senate races, including in the state of Iowa, including the state of North Carolina, including in the state of Alaska, including in the state of Montana, that Democrats spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to win, and they lost. And so what does this bill try to do? Change the electorates, and let's get a whole bunch of illegal voters to change the composition of the electorate, along with a partisan Federal Election Commission that will be counted on. The Chuck Schumer Election Commission, like clockwork, there will be an October surprise. Who are the vulnerable Republicans? Who are Republicans in close races? Boom. The Chuck Schumer Federal Election Commission will announce investigations and fines directed against them. This is a brazen power grab by the Democrats because you've decided democracy isn't worth it. You want to fix the game so the voters don't have control over our election.
Okay, so I have so much issues with what you just said because I'm thinking back to 2016 when, in fact, Hillary Clinton conceded the election, when, in fact, we had an electoral college. I know because Senator Blunt and I were in charge of it, and Vice President Biden was presiding over it, and it went through. We didn't object to those results. Then let's fast forward to the day of the insurrection, to January 6th, when in fact you, Senator Cruz, not all of your colleagues here today, you were contesting the Electoral College. You were leading, one of the leaders on the effort to say that the election results were not correct. And so you wonder why we want to make sure that people have the right to vote. Well, it's because of this kind of rhetoric and this kind of behavior and an insurrection at the Capitol and a former president that is still maintaining that he somehow won the election when we all know it's not true. And so that's why, if you ask why we are still interested in protecting our democracy from that day of January 6th on, I think that's your answer.
Well, Chairman Klobuchar, this bill had nothing to do with the 2020 election because it was drafted 4 years earlier. This bill has everything to do with Democrats trying to rig the election to stay in power and to disenfranchise voters. That's what this election is about. And by the way, Hillary Clinton insisted after the election she didn't lose. And not only that, Hillary Clinton advised Joe Biden, under no circumstances should you concede. So the ahistorical rewriting of what occurred is not accurate, and rigging the system to take away the rights of voters, this is designed to keep Democrats in power for 100 years. And it is fundamentally corrupt, and it is worth noting that when Republicans had a much bigger majority than Democrats have right now, Democrats have a 6-seat majority in the House and a 50-50 slimmest possible majority in the Senate. We made no effort to rig the system the way Democrats are doing, and that is dishonoring the promise we made to our constituents.
Anyone? Senator King?
Madam Chairman, I worked here 40-plus years ago. Mike Mansfield was the majority leader. And one of the principles that he enunciated at that time to the members, and it filtered down to us on the staff, was that you debate the issues, not the other person's motivation. And I'd like to suggest that we could elevate this discussion by talking about the provisions of the bill, not who intended to do what. Because frankly, Senator Cruz, I don't like some of your statements because I know what I believe and why I'm supporting not all, but many, if not most, of the provisions of this bill. And it doesn't have anything to do with keeping Democrats in power. It has to do with making sure the maximum number of Americans vote. It certainly doesn't have anything to do with making it so illegal aliens can vote. If there's a provision in here that you believe facilitates that, let's talk about it. But let's not attribute
I'm happy to do
illegitimate
so.
motives to people, okay? Thank you.
Okay. Should we have a vote on this amendment? Okay.
Senator Feinstein.
No by proxy.
Senator Schumer.
And no by proxy.
Senator Warner.
No by proxy.
Senator Leahy.
No by proxy.
Senator King. Senator Merkley. Senator Padilla. Senator Ossoff.
No by proxy.
Senator Blunt.
Vote yes.
Senator McConnell.
Aye.
Senator Shelby.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Cruz. Senator Capito.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Wicker.
Aye.
Senator Fisher.
Aye.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Aye.
Senator Hagerty.
Aye.
Chairwoman Klobuchar.
No.
9 ayes, 9 noes.
The amendment is not adopted. Next,